What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. We're breaking down another prospect from the New York Jets 2024 undrafted free agent class, and I have cornerback Myles Jones out of Texas A&M, but he ended up finishing his collegiate career with Duke. And immediately when I looked at him, this screams to me this is a Richard Sherman project type player, right? Robert Saleh, ideally, this guy, I don't think he makes the 53-man roster, but we stash him on the practice squad. We let Tony Odom and company really get to just work with him for a full year, try to get him developed up. He's as close to a fit as you can generally ask for from not only a skill perspective, but also the physical traits that he's going to bring. Look at him, he's absolutely massive, right? 6'4". He plays at about 190 to 194 pounds, was a former 3-star recruit. And I'm not extremely high on what I've seen out of him in his career if you just look at the statistics. On film, things look like they came together pretty well. There seemed like there was a rapid development ascension for him, and then some things fell off, but a lot of it is due to injury. So if we work our way through where he started off with Texas A&M, where he lasted 6 years, he led his team in pass breakups as a freshman and a sophomore. He's been able to get his hands on the balls in terms of INTs frequently enough for a guy that plays a lot of man coverage. And you know, when you're playing that position, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to a lot of opportunities to get your hands on the ball, but led his team in pass breakups as a freshman and sophomore. Sophomore to junior year was probably some of his best tape before you seen that decline due to injury. I mean, his last really like 3 collegiate years, he didn't really get to play a ton of games, right? His last 2 years at Texas A&M, I believe he played only like a combined 3 games. Then he went to Duke, ended up dealing with more injury struggles, and I think he only got in like 1 or 2 games at Duke, but he ended up being pretty productive over the course of his entire collegiate career. So it's not like that absence of that additional tape necessarily takes a whole lot away from him. It's just that this really would have stunted his growth quite a bit, right? And I equate this a lot to people that we've seen time and time again with the New York Jets, where the injury bug just seems to always strike them, whether it's taken away off seasons to help curve that development, or it's just the fact that we can never get them on the field. And a prime example would be a guy like Blake Cashman, right? I think he benefited a ton from this coaching staff, but we never really got to see him, and now he's balling out and looking like he could be a perennial Pro Bowl, maybe second team All-Pro type linebacker with what he's doing out there on the field. But to get back to our guy here, Myles, some of the other things that stood out to me was during the course of his tenure with Texas A&M, you can see where the coaching staff got more and more comfortable with him, what they asked him to do, and him really leading that secondary group when he earned the Defensive Most Improved in Defensive Strength Awards at one of their annual team banquets. And I think that always says a lot when you don't, when you get like the Associated Press, All-Pro Awards, Pro Bowls and stuff like that. That holds some strong weight, right? And, separate group of people, but it's nothing like hearing, seeing the NFL top 100 list and seeing all of the other top tier players, offensively, defensively, special teams wise, say, no, this is the guy. So for his team to call him out, I think that's a huge plus here. Then, as mentioned, he became a graduate transfer to Duke. And again, everything with this guy starts from a physical standpoint, right? It's a throwback Robert Saleh DB when you want to go back to his Seattle days, where they really just looked almost specifically at physical measurements and what they wanted their certain positions to look like, and they would help build the skills into somebody. It was almost like a build a cornerback factory out there, right? And maybe Robert Saleh is borrowing some of those principles once again here. Long arms, You look at the size from a height perspective. Even his movement ability is eerily freaky-ish for his size. I'm not ready to say he's somebody that really breaks the mold per se, but he definitely has plus ability for somebody that you expect to have high hips, lumbering movements, stuff like that. He's a little bit more of a fluid athlete, and he probably fits best in a cover 2 zone system, which we know we run a lot more zone than probably the rest of us would love to see, given our cornerback play and man coverage. But he even plays in cover 3 and cover 4, projecting, of course, pretty well. So I came away fairly impressed for a guy I didn't have high expectations of. You take a look at what he was really able to do well. One of the things that sticks out, which is another reason why checking out the tape for him was pretty important in getting a feel for it. Passing attacks actively tried to avoid this man. I mean, he will walk around and, if he saw 2 or 3 targets a game, you kind of be surprised. So that in and of itself speaks volumes for me. Capable of quick breaks to the ball. So he's a guy that if the play's in front of him, he sees things developing, the quarterback isn't processing quick, he's going to punish them every single time. And you'll see him, I won't say erase these particular type of routes, but you can see him being highly effective against curl flat combinations, slant flat combinations, where he can either really mitigate the damage and minimize that to almost nothing, or he's going to make a play happen. Turns head to avoid his flags. He turns his head in coverage to avoid flags pretty consistently. I would say he has excellent change of direction ability, again, for his size. Good back pedal. You can see him transition fairly well to a side shuffle when he needs to, and he's working in some of those zone elements. Can reroute with 1 or 2 hands, which is really important. So when you're trying to dictate how a guy is operating when he has inside versus outside leverage, it's almost like watching a tackle be able to take on 2 offensive linemen at once, right? If there's a blitz coming, or a guard that can pick off a DT and an edge player, with 2 hands separately, that takes some pretty monster strength and skill in and of itself. Knows how to stay in the hip pocket to determine route breaks. So when everything is operating perfectly for him from a footwork standpoint, from him positioning himself well, being able to do some of that rerouting with his hands. One of the best things about playing cornerback that I always loved is that moment when you essentially are running the route for the guy ahead of you. And if you stay in that hip pocket, you can lock in on that almost every time. And he's aggressive against the run. It's a very underrated element of playing cornerback and helping out the defense overall. If you look at teams like Seattle that has a Devon Witherspoon, for example, those very aggressive cornerbacks that almost turn into linebackers as soon as they realize it's a run play and they don't have to play coverage anymore, is a huge boost to the entire unit. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of development we need to work out with this particular young man. He's not the most active participant in zone, and by that, I just mean he doesn't have the greatest read and react ability necessarily when he's playing zone. There's some hesitancy there. I don't know if that's just because of a lack of playing or snaps in zone coverage per se. Again, he played a lot man to man, but something to be concerned about, especially given the amount that we play zone. Baiting quarterbacks hasn't fared well for him either. You see that out of we talked about Jarius Monroe, right? The guy we signed that's currently labeled as a safety. He can operate that fairly well. You'll see plenty of other players like Jalen Ramsey, among others, around the league. You've seen Sauce Gardner try to utilize it to get himself some turnovers to help out the team. It's very boom or bust no matter who you are. Other guys just have a knack with their athleticism, their naturally better coverage instincts and stuff to get away with that. That's something for Myles, at least at this point, where it works against him. Can fall susceptible to double moves, and false steps tend to be pretty costly for him, and that's more of a long speed concern, right? You're talking about, go routes, things like hitches, post routes, anything where a wide receiver can kind of, pull off some combo moves, if you will, and create a little bit more separation than you'd be comfortable with. He dips his head when he's leaning into the open field tackle. So you see a lot of whips on tape with that, which is never a good thing, just purely from a safety standpoint. let alone the fundamentals of tackling. Has a pretty high stance in man coverage as well, and that sets you up for a number of things, right? You end up playing on your heels a little bit more, which means you're not really being able to tap into that speed and stuff like you would want to. Agility-wise, it's going to impact you because you have to plant your foot the entire way. If you want to think about leaning back on your heels, like I mentioned, and all sorts of other issues, let alone somebody being able to eat up that cushion, get inside your chest, and instead of you being in the hip pocket and controlling it, the wide receiver can pretty much dictate where you're going to be from a balance perspective, and even in some situations cause an unnecessary collision where they can just get a free play, right, pass interference, and then they can try to take some to the house, or at least just cause a bigger play than necessary there. Gives too much separation at the stem, weak against routes like curls and comebacks in general, so that kind of plays hand in hand with potentially some of that hesitancy, I guess, when you want to talk about what we mentioned with some of the zone concerns for him. Injury concerns, as I mentioned, there's a ton of games that he's missed essentially over his last 3 years, although again, in that regard, he has been pretty productive as a player when he has been in games. Even at Duke, let's say if he just did play the 3, and hopefully I'll remember to drop the stats here for you guys to see, but even in just the 3 games, I think he had like an interception, like 3 pass breakups, and maybe like a tackle for loss amongst some other tackles or something like that. But nonetheless, he fared out well for himself. But I'm pretty excited for this guy. There's been a number of cornerbacks that we brought in just purely from an athleticism standpoint or from a physical build. I thought maybe we could find a way to keep him on the roster for quite a few years. He could be here today, gone tomorrow, who knows? But you don't find builds walking around like this every day that isn't just a walking stick figure. So I'm excited for this guy. If we can end up developing him into some even Richard Sherman light, that is a huge plus for us. Again, it's easy to find wins with undrafted free agents, but we've seen guys look good last year when we played the Eagles, for example, coming off the practice squad. So, I mean, it's you want to make sure that you have the depth all over when the injury bug is striking. But ultimately, let me know what you guys think about Myles Jones, and I'll catch you again. Peace.